Oh, what an epic rock. Alrighty. So, I've been having this thought that is recurring, and it provides me with hope, gives me assurance. I feel more self assured when I think this thought, and it makes me grateful. Pretty well, what this thought is I tend to reminisce a lot. I feel like I can be sentimental at times, and sometimes when I think back, I'm like, oh wow, things were so much better, or things were so much easier back then. But then when I actually really think about the moment, I remember, wait, no, things were pretty tough during those times. You know, life wasn't the greatest, or whatever it may be, or I was really trying to figure something out. And it's kind of funny how we do that when we look back in rose-covered goggles or glasses, and we forget how difficult things really were. And then that made me think, well, hey, if you're going through a hard time right now, or whenever I find myself in a hard time, when things seem difficult, I just reflect on how I think back on the times that were actually really difficult and how I view those as amazing times. And then I'm thinking, okay, if that's how I view those times, then in only a few years' times, I'll view these moments as these grand, glorious things. So pretty well to summarize this thought is that, yes, it may seem difficult now, but in the future, you may find yourself actually cherishing these moments, and due to your new perspective or due to the new heights that you've seen, you may be like, oh wow, those times were actually pretty easy. And you know what, maybe looking back at those times that were seemingly difficult in the moment, relative to now, yes, they may actually be like pretty easy times. You know, life may have just been a lot easier back then. But at the same time, I feel like, or what I've noticed in my life, is that as the level of difficulty of life ramps up, the rewards are higher, like the rewards are better, and life just seemingly is better. And the game that comes to mind is like Borderlands. When you first start out in Borderlands, you get these common, like gray, boring, dull guns, maybe like a few gold ingots or something. You don't get much. But as the game gets more difficult, it actually gets more fun because there's so many more enemies on the screen. There's so much more going on. The bosses get that much more difficult, and the guns just get that much cooler as the game gets more difficult. And as your character levels up, like, you go from some basic character to some dude with like all these sick abilities and all these sick upgrades, and you can just do so much. Like, you can just go like rage mode, like dual wield gun, like all this wild stuff that you couldn't do at the beginning of the game. Although it was easier, it was not nearly as fun. And I know that was a bit of a tangent, but kind of like how I relate that to life is, as life seemingly gets more difficult, it seems to me that you develop the skills to adapt to the difficulty, and with those skills, it makes life that much more fun. It makes life that much more cooler. So sure, yes, it may be more difficult, but I feel like that makes life better. It's the challenge, man. And I feel like this might seem like one long tangent, but this is sort of like the thoughts that I've been having recently when it comes to looking back at the past and thinking forward about the future. And another interesting thought I actually had, or not that I didn't have, but I heard of from a businessman named Alex Ramosi, was what he likes to do is he imagines that he woke up in his body now, but he was like, imagine you're an 80-year-old man, right? And then you just close your eyes and then you open them in your younger self's body. Like, what would you notice? You'd be like, oh wow, my skin is not as wrinkly, my joints don't hurt, I feel like all this extra energy, and you look around, it's like, oh wow, there's not flying cars everywhere, or I remember when my dog was still alive, or when so-and-so was still alive, and it almost makes you feel grateful for the moment right now. And that could be something you play with right now, is imagine yourself as an 80-year-old man, and then you wake up now in your younger body. Like, what would you be grateful for? What would you look at and be amazed to have again? Just an interesting mental experiment. Mental experiment. I feel like this idea isn't necessarily original, come to think of it. Like, it's almost the idea that, or the thing that's trumpeted a lot, which is, oh, like, these are the good times, you know, like, oh, like, right now is where it's at. I feel like that's kind of what I reiterated, just in a little bit of an abstract way. And this brings me to another thought. As you can tell, I like to think. Brings me to another thought that I've said before, but I love to say it, is that, like, no idea is original, I find. Anything that I come up with, or any abstraction of an idea that, like, no matter how bizarre and creative and abstract I feel it may be, once brought down to the roots, I come to realize that somebody's already said it, and they've probably said it a lot better than I've said it, a lot more clear, a lot more concise, but it's almost like I am reinterpreting something I've already heard or learned before. And as original as it may seem, once you peek behind the curtains of the abstraction, or once I begin to realize it's not even original, and the only reason I know about this and that I look for this is because I read this from somebody else, Friedrich Nietzsche, or like some other philosopher that said, oh yes, thoughts and ideas are not necessarily original, they're merely rememberings of what is already known. So it's like, even this idea isn't even like my own, which is wild. It's like, dude, what is an original idea? Wow, and there's a squirrel coming up. It's about to post up on me. That's a big squirrel. I'll show you guys. It's a big boy. Oh, he's running away. Whoa. He's running away. Anyways, I'm gonna leave the video off at this. I feel like this is a good spot to end it. Let's observe this squirrel. Whoa.